And so that's where I kind of thought to myself, I think this book should have been written backwards. Like, we should have started with this, the DIY stuff, and getting the reader in that mindset of like, oh, some pain can be good. Hi, my name's Aaliyah, and welcome to the Birth Nerd Book Club. In this series, we will be discussing birth-related books, some old as well as some new, and I'm going to give my perspectives and opinions on the book, and I will hope that you will join me in the comments and give some of your perspectives and opinions as well. This is episode 2, so if you missed part 1, please go ahead and go back. And the book we are currently reading is called Labor Pain by Henci Goer. And there's a bunch of other subtitles that says something about like take control and make a plan and something like that. So picking up where we left off at the wrap up of epidurals. And the next chapter she talks about a spinal and epidural combination, which is what I just found out, commonly known or popularly known as a walking epidural. I never had any concept or idea of what this actually was. So I appreciate her going into detail about it and about how it's administered and what exactly it is. So that was extremely insightful and helpful because people tout it as like an alternative or like a special kind of epidural, but it's not even really the same thing. You won't have exactly the same effect. In her opinion, it's not worth it at all to even try the walking epidural. After the spinal epidural combo, she talks about opioids, and she goes into a few of the different kinds of opioids and why you might want them, and you know how it's a little less, or a little like if you just need a little oomph to get over a hump. I don't agree at all with this whole entire chapter. I don't think opioids should be given at all during labor, and which is also why I have an issue with an epidural to begin with, because there are opioids being given. And just if you look up the way that an opioid works, it affects your pain receptors, which I think are important. I think you should know what you're feeling, and if things are hurting, you need to be able to communicate with your body and understand your body. So I personally think that those things are really important, and I don't think you should be numbing them. She specifically talks about an opioid called remifentanil as if it's some like great new thing. Like the tone around it is like, oh yeah, if you're gonna get opioids, ask for this one. She also states, that you don't get to choose your opioid. You just basically get whatever your hospital has on tap. If you decide opioids are what the pain management you want to use, then you can go ahead and see if they have this remifentanil. And the reason why she says that is because it's like it metabolizes faster in your body. But that like completely negates all of the risks associated with it. I'm just gonna insert here a few pictures of some blurbs off of websites, as well as I'm gonna leave the links in the description so you can read a little bit more for yourself about the remifentanil, and as well as a few other things I'm gonna mention in this this section, because after the opioids she goes into nitrous oxide, which again is like also known as laughing gas, and it has risks. Like these things sound fine, but they have risks. So she gets to the DIY section, and I really was like, finally, you're finally getting to the section about the things that help the most. And she does explain them well, but she doesn't seem as enthusiastic about them. So I think that any common person listening will just kind of like brush them off or not look further into them, or even just be like, oh, okay, that sounds cute, but not really consider it as one of their options. The things she's saying are true. They are factual. She does touch on the fact that some pain can be towards a good thing, or some pain can be essentially good, but not in depth and not very enthusiastic. And so that's where I kind of thought to myself, I think this book should have been written backwards. Like, we should have started with this, the DIY stuff, and getting the reader in that mindset of like, oh, some pain can be good, before getting into that like deeper information that you have to really process and to understand. It's really hard for a lot of people to understand research and to fully grasp the weight of some of those things. And so to say, oh, you know, an epidural, XYZ% of women were satisfied or reported satisfaction with their epidural. People don't really grasp what that concept means. So they were happy with it. That's what their mind will go to. Not so much like, oh, it actually worked versus didn't work, or it was effective versus wasn't effective, or it affected the way that they were treated because then the nurse was neglecting them, which she did touch on. I give her that. She touched on it, but not with any emphasis, not in the way that it would make someone question further for themselves. So I think leaving this, someone's gonna go, okay, epidural's not so bad, opioids not so bad, nitrous oxide not so bad. Like, it's all gonna sound not so bad. And the reality of it is that some of these things have grave risks and dangers to people. And I don't think that should be kind of glossed over. Even nitrous oxide, like, the effects for the mother are less because she's around it less, but like if it's a hospital where nitrous oxide is being offered and used often, the actual staff, that's what I was reading on I want to say it was the CDC website, like the staff in the room is also being exposed to it at a greater level, and greater levels than are recommended, and those greater levels literally lead to infertility. So for the staff, it's not a good thing. So how can it be such a good thing for a mom? Never mind the fact that both opioids and the nitrous oxide are going to have you in this loopy state of mind where you're kind of like out of it. Why would you want to be out of it, like, at all? When speaking with my clients, and from personal experience with trying a dosage of an opioid during my first labor, and from seeing other women early on in my doula career using opioids, I highly, highly suggest against them. I don't think there's any benefit to not having your brain in optimal functioning order during your labor and your birth. That does not make sense to me. If it affects how you think, like getting drunk or smoking weed, it affects how you think. Why would you want that during your labor? Why would you want to be in that state when you're about to meet your baby? Wouldn't you want to be fully present and in your body? I just don't understand that at all. I don't understand why anybody would want it or recommend it. The pain of labor is mostly mental. And so if you do more of the DIY things she calls it in this book, you're not gonna feel like you have quote unquote labor pain the way that you imagine it, or the way that media portrays it, or the way that you've been told to fear it. So wrapping up the book, she has a section called Your Takeaway, and basically it's like if an epidural is your plan A or if an epidural is your plan B, and kind of like how to approach the situation based on the decision you've made around an epidural. And her final thoughts, she says that she thinks an epidural should be plan B. And I think an epidural should not be an option unless extenuating circumstances. So that's pretty much my opinion on it. I think the book is good so that people have actual information that is not biased and that presents the research if they're into that, and that gives a clear understanding of what exactly those things mean. Although I don't think that the risks were delved into enough. In the epidural section, she definitely got into like the epidural headache and the blood pressure and all of that, but like in some of these other ones, she doesn't really highlight it like that. Like a lot of the other options also have that lowering of blood pressure effect. So my opinion is that this is a good book for people who are considering a medicalized birth. I don't think this is a good book for anyone who is going into this thinking, I want an unmedicated birth, I want a natural birth, I want a home birth. This is not your book. This is a book for somebody who's going into their birth thinking, I want a medicated birth, I want a hospital birth, I want an epidural, I don't want to feel pain, I want to be numb, I would have a C-section if it wasn't major surgery. I would have a C-section if the recovery wasn't so hard. I think this is a good book for those people because then they can understand kind of the decisions they're making around medications that is going to affect their labor. Because if they're going into it with that mindset, or if they're going into an induction where they're already augmenting with medication, which almost always ends up with an epidural as well, then it's good to know this information going in. It's good to know what to expect when the epidural is being administered. It will calm your fight or flight response, although your fight or flight response is going to happen if you're in labor and then you choose to go to the hospital. It's going to happen whether you want it to or not. It's just how your nature is. It's how your physiology is, and you can't really just decide to turn that off. A little bit of my perspective, I don't believe that birth is inherently painful. I don't believe that some women just have more painful labors than other women. I think that there are things that contribute to each person's perception of pain, things that go way back to their childhood, all the way up to the most recent thing they read about someone in labor. That all of these things can change your perception of pain, as well as if you experience pain regularly, outside pain, like a headache or migraine pain regularly, then you have a very skewed or negative relation, like you relate it in your mind as terrible because your experience with pain on a daily basis, if you're having migraines or something like that, it's detrimental to you. People who work out have a different experience with pain. They have a different perspective of pain because they gain from the pain. The pain makes them stronger. They know like their muscles being shredded apart only to recover later. Like that's a good thing to them. So them thinking about pain versus somebody who deals with chronic pain or something like that is going to be completely different. Or someone who experienced a lot of pain being inflicted on them in an accident type of situation or something like that. Their perspective of the word pain is going to be different. People who go through a lot of struggles but still have a positive attitude, their perspective of the word and the idea of pain is going to be different. If you've gone through a lot of things that most people consider hard, your perspective on this labor pain is going to be completely different. And so if you're considering what are my options for coping with labor pain, I encourage you to consider the fact that you may not experience your labor as painful, and accept that before you go into it, just accepting that it's going to be painful. Thank you for reading Labor Pain by Henci Goer with me, and I hope that you found this video entertaining in some way. I hope I kept you company, and I would love to know some of your perspectives, especially if they're different than mine. Let's talk about it in the comments below. If you have a book suggestion that you want to go ahead and read with us, let me know. Please like the video if you liked it, comment, subscribe. Our next book is Unassisted Childbirth by Laura Shanley. I am really looking forward to it. I've had 2 unassisted births. I really love being a doula for women who are having unassisted births, and it's just a topic that I'm really passionate about. So I hope that you will join me next week.